أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى. وهل أتاك حديث موسى إذ رأى نارا فقال لأهلهم كثوا إني آنست نارا لعلي آتيكم منها بقبس أو أجد على النار هدى فلما أتاها نودي يا موسى إني أنا ربك فاخلع عليك إنك بالواد المقدس طوى وأنا اخترتك فاستمع لما يوحى إنني أنا الله لا إله إلا أنا فاعبدني وأقم الصلاة لذكري إن الساعة آتية أكاد أخفيها لتجزى كل نفس بما تسعى فلا يصدنك عنها من لا يؤمن بها واتبع هواه فتردى وما تلك بيمينك يا موسى قال هي عصاي أتوكأ عليها وأهش بها على غنمي ولي فيها مآرب أخرى قال ألقها يا موسى فألقاها فإذا هي حية تسعى صدق الله العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Inshallah, tonight we will talk about the birth of Isa alayhi salam. And in doing that, there's two primary places in the Quran where the birth of Isa alayhi salam is mentioned. The first is in Surah Ali Imran, and the second is in Surah Maryam. So between the two of them, there are some things mentioned in one place and not mentioned in the other, and there's complementation obviously between the two of those, as well as other ayat that are found throughout the Quran. So inshallah tonight, rather than going strictly in the order of what we find in Surah Maryam, I'm going to take some from Surah Al Imran and some from Surah Maryam. So as we go through the slides tonight, just keep in mind that these are not in the order that they're found in the Quran. Khair, Bismillah ar-Rahman, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The first ayah we'll talk about, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذْ قَالَتِ امْرَأَةُ عِمْرَانَ رَبِّي إِنِّي نَذَرْتُ لَكَ مَا فِي بَطَنِي مُحَرَّرًا فَتَقَبَّلْ مِنِّي. Remember, speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of course in extension to all of us, remember when Imran's wife said, "Oh my Lord, I have vowed that what is in my womb will be devoted exclusively for you, so accept it from me. You certainly are the all-hearing and the all-knowing." That's in the next ayah. So the point here, what we're going to see is that the story starts with the Imra'atu Imran, the wife of Imran, who is the mother of Maryam alayhi salam, who is the mother of Isa alayhi salam. So I think the story is best started at this generation. When the wife of Imran, she said, she made a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever is in my womb, that she's going to dedicate it to him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll talk about what that means. Good parents beget good children. This is the general rule. Of course, there's exceptions, but generally, good, pious parents will beget good, pious children. To have a pious child, you need to have pious parents and pious grandparents. Ideally, this will set up the situation for the greatest likelihood of having good children and good generations to come. Children inherit their values, their character, if they're given the proper exposure to a tarbiyah of piety. And they are also at the same time protected from bad influences. So what that means practically for us is that you may have a very nice home. You may pray 5 times a day. You yourself may be a practicing pious Muslim. But if your children are thrown into other influences outside of the home, or even influences that are brought into the home in the form of television, music, and movies, and so on, then that too is an influence on them. Oftentimes you have parents who are very religious, very pious, mashallah, amazing people, but the children don't turn out that way. And when you start examining the life of the children, you find, well, they spent a lot of time in bad influences, again, whether outside or within the home. And the parents really weren't aware of how much they were absorbing during that time. So the point is that children inherit their values and their character first from their parents, and mostly from their parents, and then from the other surrounding environment. So the parents need to keep in mind that environment and create a good environment. Sometimes what's at home isn't good enough. And so you have to take them to the local imam, the local pious people, or seek out other people and give them that exposure. So here we're talking about the grandmother Isa alayhi salam, the mother of Maryam alayhi salam. She promised her child to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she sought his protection from shaitan. She thought that the child was going to be a boy, and thinking that a boy, this was her misconception, that a boy will serve a better position, will be in a better position to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she dedicated the child to Allah. Of course, boys can do the khidmah of taking care of the masjid and the people that attend the masjid and helping out the community as well. And so boys are in a good position, let's say men are in a good position to take care of the zahiri means, the outward means of benefiting the deen. Why? Because they have more of an ability to go out into the public, to deal with them, to speak in front of people without the same level of hijab that a woman needs to deal with. So these are zahiri means of benefiting the deen. It's generally, and it has not been, the role of women to be in the public. And really, it's being in the public has never been anything sought by any people of the deen. Meaning pious people from the very beginning till our time, including all of the Anbiya and the Sahaba and the Ashab, they were never in a situation, they were never of the mentality of going out in the public, wanting to be in the public, seeking out the spotlight. This has never been anything that was thought to be good. So this is something that, I'll bring it up because it's something that's lost on a lot of people today. That we've begun, because our culture does, we've begun to judge people by their fame. And this really exploded, I think, with television. The fact that now a person's face can be in front of everybody, and even more so with the internet now that a person's face and words can be in front of everybody, we have started to judge people by how well they are known by people, how much of a wave can you cause in the pool of the public. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't care for any of that. Men do it, meaning go out into the public and deal with the public, deal with the dunya as a necessary evil, not as a praised trait. It should never be lost on us that, and especially on the people that speak in the public, that going out in the public is a dangerous situation. It is dangerous for a person's iman. It is a danger to the condition of their heart, because they become prey to kibr and ujab and riya and all of these other ills that destroy a believer. In fact, it's good on one hand that we encourage our youth to give talks, to go out and benefit the public. But on the other hand, we should realize, and I think most people do not, especially the parents of these children, that when you put your child in that situation, you are also putting them in a position of harm, of great harm to their iman, in fact. That child, if they don't have the proper tarbiyah, and before they have the proper ilm and the training by proper people of knowledge, to throw them in front of the public and to be able to give talks, to have to dress up a certain way and speak a certain way, get people's attentions and their accolades and their praises, can really destroy and harm a person, especially somebody who's young and not ready and to deal with that particular situation. So if we're going to take this as a stance, then we need to be very careful of it. The other problem with putting young people who have little knowledge, or maybe they've even studied, maybe they've even graduated somewhere, but they haven't had their tarbiyah completed, and they haven't had the influence of people who are older and experienced, that those people, they tend to get into the public and they become comfortable. They become comfortable speaking on behalf of the deen. And when you speak on behalf of the deen, you speak on behalf of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a very dangerous position to be in. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us in no uncertain terms, in a hadith that is mutawatir, mass transmitted in such a way that there's no doubt about it, that whoever tells a lie about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will take his seat in the hellfire. And so a person needs to be very careful about that. This is a very grave situation to be in. So if we're going to put somebody young in that situation, we need to be careful. And anyone young who is in that situation needs to be extraordinarily careful about what they say. Don't say anything unless it is the position of the majority of scholars, for example. If you go out on your own and you start giving fatwas, it's very easy to give a fatwa without realizing that you're giving a fatwa, because you're speaking on behalf of the Sharia. To go out in the public and start answering questions based upon your little knowledge, to be answering people their advice based upon mistaken knowledge that you have, or to leave the path of the majority and to start giving minority positions or shadh opinions or outright rejected opinions, is a situation that could destroy you in this dunya and in the akhirah. We need to be very careful about that. So coming back to what I was speaking about, that going in front of the public is a necessary evil for men. And unfortunately, in our situation today, we have started to take it as something of a praiseworthy trait. And women in general, from the Anbiya, looking at Imra'atu Imran and Maryam, especially today, since we're speaking about them, their situation has not been one of going out into the public. Unfortunately, there's a trait that men are supposed to have called ghayra. Ghayra for their women, some people call it ghira, for their women, this has always been a trait of the Anbiya. This has always been a trait of the believers. This is a trait that was praised by the Prophet ﷺ. And the absence of that trait has always been the way of the fusaq and the kuffar, not of the believers. In fact, if we look at the Quran itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't mention by name any woman in the Quran with the exception of Maryam alayhi salam. Not a single one. Even here, Imra'atu Imran, her name is not given. Instead, she's referred to by the name of her husband, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He preferred hijab and satr for the believing, pious, chaste women. And He hid their names. And if we read the books of the ulama, and we find that they did the same thing. And for their own women, they would do the same thing. There's a certain level of ghairah that the Prophet and that Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam set the standard for, and it's been followed since then. But unfortunately, now we find people moving away from that. People putting up pictures of their women for everyone to see. People taking out their women dressed up in a certain way for everyone to see. And obviously right now I'm speaking to the men who are listening that ghairah is a trait of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is not something we should be shy about. It is not something that we should turn away from. It is the trait of the Anbiya and all of the believers since them. It is something that we need to get back again. So why is Maryam alayhi salam mentioned out of all the other women who were not mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The Mufassirun tell us that the reason for her specifically that she was made an exception was to make it very clear to the Christians and everybody else that Isa alayhi salam is the son of Maryam. To make it very clear that he is the son of a woman, and he also pointed out who that woman was for that reason. Otherwise, Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam were not in the habit of doing that. Remember that what I'm saying right now may not sound very palatable to a lot of people because of the culture that we've been raised in and we are surrounded by. But our deen values the akhirah over the dunya. We want to be known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't care to be known by people here. We want to be praised on the day of judgment by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't care for the praise here. Our focus is strictly on the akhirah. So anyway, the wife of Imran had a daughter instead of a son as she thought she would. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted her into His service instead anyway. And her role would be to serve the public through ghaibi means. Remember, as I said, men are in the position where they serve through generally zahiri means, through outward means. Whereas the job of Maryam was still to serve Allah. She was still dedicated to the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, entirely to His service. But her means of benefit was one which was ghaibi, something that is more beneficial than zahiri, than the outward means. She would serve instead by worshipping and doing the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When one person or a group of people does the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way of complete ikhlas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down His blessings and His mercy upon that person. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not so restrictive that He only allows that mercy to fall on that one individual, but rather Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He spreads that mercy out to everybody around that person. So Maryam alayhi salam, when she was doing her ibadah, it's quite likely that the mercy and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descended upon everyone in that area and served to benefit everyone in a way that no boy could have done, that no male or anyone else could have done out in the public, no matter how much they worked. So she was dedicated to the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other means besides her ghaibi asbab, her ibadah, is also that she was, because of this situation, because of the du'as of her mother and the nadhr of her mother, and then her own ibadah, she was given the task of raising one of the greatest prophets. And again, I told you, if you want to have a pious child, an amazing child, then you have to look at the parents and the grandparents. They have to fix their ways for that to happen. A point here is that this type of oath that Maryam alayhi salam took was allowed back then in their deen, but it is not allowed in our deen. It's no longer allowed in our Sharia. Rather, today, if you want to raise your daughters properly, meaning in the way that Maryam alayhi salam was dedicated, then teach your children, your daughters, ilm of the Quran and of the Hadith. Teach them amal, how to practice upon it, and teach them how the closeness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that keeps them away from the hurumat and the makruhat. And instead, they're only doing what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instead. Of course, raise your sons the same way as well, but the discussion here is specifically about daughters because that's what we're talking about. The boys, they have, in the character of Isa alayhi salam, they have their role model there instead. So before we break here for a second, let me mention the lesson here is that pious children rarely come from nowhere. Of course, they do sometimes, but most of the time they arise from pious parents and pious grandparents.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his beloved book, and hold fast all together to the rope of Allah, and be not divided among yourselves. Ramadan is a month of worship, a month of growth, and a month where we all come together as a community. During this uncertain and stressful time, our centers may be empty, but our hearts are full. We are still connected as a community through our memories, our prayers, and our bond as brothers and sisters. This Ramadan, while we worship at home, let us continue to support the growth of our community center, MCMC. Now, our institution needs us. It is time to come together. Support your masjid. Donate today.
Social distancing will change significantly fast, will also suffer.
Heading into work today. And it just hit me. I miss you. MCMC to me has always been my home away from home. It's the place where my love of Islam grew. It's the place that when I was at Rutgers and there was stress of work and stress of school, I could always rely on MCMC to be that place to give me a sense of peace, a sense of sukoon. And so with Ramadan coming in just a few days, it's hitting me that I miss my community more than ever. The iftars, the taraweeh, the jummas, the lectures. Ramadan is a reminder of what community means, and MCMC has been the setting of that for so many reasons. So I was thinking, why shouldn't that still be the case? Why can't we make this the best Ramadan yet? Go to mcmcnj.org to learn how we'll do it. Every day, a reminder of what we stand for and an adhan to break our fast with, live on YouTube and Facebook. This Ramadan, let's have iftar together.
All right, Bismillah. Before I forget, inshallah, this series tomorrow will start at 9:15. So rather than 8:45, we're going to start a half hour later, 9:15 p.m. inshallah. Don't forget, we're going to give ourselves a little bit more time before we start, inshallah. So the next slide here, moving on. فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا وَكَفَّلَهَا زَكَرِيَّا كلما دخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا قال يا مريم أنى لك هذا قالت هو من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. So her Lord accepted her, a good acceptance, and made her grow a good growth, and made Zakaria her guardian. Whenever Zakaria visited her at the place of worship, he found food with her. He said, Maryam, from where did you have this? She said, it is from Allah. Surely Allah gives whom He wills without measure. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took care of Maryam alayhi salam. Her mother came and gave her to the caretakers of the masjid to raise her and to take care of her. At the time, they were trying to decide who would have this honor of taking care of this child. And it only made sense. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused it to happen as well. The Zakaria, who was her uncle, Zakaria's wife was the aunt, meaning her mother's sister. And so there was a direct blood relationship there. In fact, the sister of your mother is practically like your mother, meaning the relationship is very close and the love is similar as well. And so Zakaria came in, became her kafil and took care of her. And while there, she was given the best of rooms from what the narrations tell us. All of her needs were fully taken care of. At times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave her rizq directly from the ghaib. As mentioned in the ayah, Zakaria alayhi salam would find her with fruits that were completely not even in season. And at a time when the doors were locked, because he was the one who took care of the masjid, he was the one who unlocked the doors and locked the doors. So he knew when someone could come in and when they could go out. And she would have this rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any other means other than coming directly from the ghaib. Later, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time of her giving birth will cause to have a date tree, give dates near her as well as a stream. So the bottom line is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of her. This is also proof, the proof that she had these fruits and this rizq coming from the ghaib is proof, as the scholars mention, that miracles can also be given to non-prophets, because the correct opinion is that Maryam alayhi salam was not a prophet, but she received miracles anyway. The ayah says nabat and hasana, a good growth, and according to the mufassirin, this means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala engaged her in ibadah from an early age. It can also have the meaning of growing healthy, but the stronger opinion is that a good growth isn't just physically growing, but a good growth is that somebody's ibadah, their nature grows in a way that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the lesson here is that those people who are dedicated and dedicate themselves to the path of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of them. Those parents that dedicate their children in the cause, in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't need to worry about their financial status. Sure, they may not have a ton of money and they might live their life with some financial worry, but this has always been the case of the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of the ulama of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the vast majority of them, there were exceptions, but the vast majority of them lived a very simple life in this dunya, sometimes not knowing where their next meal was going to come from. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of all of them, and He will take care of the future generations as well. If Allah wants, He will give them the rizq from ghaibi, from the complete ghaib, without knowing. And I have met people who I have no doubt that much of their rizq comes from the ghaib, without them having to worry about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of them. And as I've seen it firsthand, I have complete conviction in this matter. It's not something that I worry about. This doesn't mean that we don't take the outward means. I'm not negating that by any means. But, sometimes when you try to prove a point, you overshoot the point. And so most of us have, in trying to prove the point of taking care of the outward means, we've overshot that point to the point that we have left our children without much in the way of looking to the ghaib, looking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly for assistance, which is a thing as well. Without getting into it too much because of lack of time, there are zahiri means, there are means that we take that are outward. There are ghaibi means as well. There are means that we take that come from the ghaib. Both of them need to take place without one going too far to one side or the other. And so we should understand that there are things that we do. For example, praying in jama'ah, coming together, establishing institutions for the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that these have very real benefits that are from the ghaib, that we cannot explain them. We cannot have a scientific explanation for it, but yet the benefit is very real. And this is what our deen teaches us. And those who have open eyes will see it and experience it directly for themselves. So next ayah, وَإِذْ قَالَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ يَا مَرْيَمُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ اسْتَفَاكِ وَطَهَّرَكِ وَاصْطَفَاكِ عَلَى نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ يا مريم اقنتي لربك واسجدي واركعي مع الراكعين. And mention when the angels, the malaika, said, O Maryam, indeed Allah has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above the women of the worlds. O Maryam, be devoutly obedient to your Lord and prostrate and bow with those who bow in prayer. So the wording I want you to focus on is, number one, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose Maryam alayhi salam. Why? Because of the act of her mother. Why? Because of her act of doing ibadah and dedicating herself solely for Allah, walking away from everything else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose her above all the other women because they had not done that. In other words, so here when Allah is saying that be devoutly obedient to your Rabb and prostrate and bow with those who bow, Allah is saying that keep doing the ibadah that you're doing. I'm pleased with it. In this last part of the ayah, some people have misconstrued it and interpreted it to mean that وَرُكَعِي مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ is that you should go and join the jama'ah. This is completely wrong. The Mufassirun have rejected this as an interpretation. Here it means that do ruku like the people who do ruku, not literally go and join them and stand with them, but rather in the way that the believers do ruku, then go and do ruku in that same manner, meaning do the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, here we see in the actions of Maryam alayhi salam that pious children are born to pious parents. And particularly the mother has a great effect. How she treats herself before, during the pregnancy, and afterwards, it influences the child. If her life prior to, during, or afterwards is one in which the Quran is recited, Allah is remembered, then the child is more likely to have those traits in him or her as well, because the mother really influences the child. The father's job is to influence the family. Both are ultimately responsible for each of those things. So each one needs to be particularly careful about how they fulfill that responsibility. One thing, let me mention as an aside here, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected the story of Zakaria alayhi salam along with the story of Isa alayhi salam, mentioning it during that discussion. So the situation of Zakaria alayhi salam very quickly was that he had not had a child and he wanted a child. And he and his wife had reached an old age, at an age where people generally can't have children anymore. But he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, قال ربي هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة إنك سميع الدعاء. That he called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, my Lord, grant me from yourself a good offspring. Indeed, you are the hearer of supplication. So he made dua for a good child. Elsewhere in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. The dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he says, Ar-Rabb, grant us from among our wives and our offspring comfort to our eyes and make us an example of the righteous. قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, one of the Salaf, mentioned that قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ is not looking at your child and being proud of them because they have this degree or that degree. It's not looking at your child and saying, oh, mashallah, they're so beautiful, they're so handsome. No, what قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ really means, that the true meaning of it that's implied in the dua is that you see your family, your wives and your children engaged in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you see them praying in the middle of the night. You see them remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see them reciting Quran without having to make them do it. Instead, they have that love for them that they inherited perhaps, or they were gifted through tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that seeing them do that, that is qurrata ayun. That is a comfort to the eyes. That is what's really meant here. So again, the reason I point these things out is to correct our own perception of things. Being very cognizant of the type of culture we grow up in, oftentimes we look at our children and we become happy for something that is not necessarily what true happiness is. And so when the Quran points that out to us, when the Prophet ﷺ and the Aslaf pointed out to us, then it's good that we pay attention. We look at ourselves and we say, is my personality like that? Is my perception of the dunya this way as well? And if it's not, then we make corrections. And if it is, then we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. So the recommendation of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to have children. The society of our times, again, I don't mean to be too critical, but again, we need to correct our perception that our society really values capitalism and the capitalism in dunya over having children. So we see that people don't want to have children because of financial reasons. How am I going to pay for college? If we have another child, then we won't be able to take that vacation every year. We won't be able to go to this destination or that destination. I can't go back home. I can't go to Umrah. I can't do these other things that we do for relaxation and time away if we have another child. We can't have that bigger house because we can't afford the mortgage, and so on and so on. Our fear and worry of the dunya becomes a reason not to have children. And this is something that the kuffar have been like for a long time. But Muslims are beginning to adopt this as a way as well, adopt this mentality. The wisdom of our deen, the hikmah in our deen, is that it is impermissible. I shouldn't even say hikmah, the ruling in our deen is that it's impermissible to have children out of fear of money. Because it's a route, it's a subtle way for the shaitan, a tactic of his, to enter into our minds and make us have less children, or have us not want to have them in the first place. When the Prophet ﷺ told us clearly, تَزَوَّجُوا الْوَدُودَ الْوَلُودَ فَإِنِّي مُكَاثِرٌ بِكُمُ الْأُمَمِ, that he commanded his companions marry women who are loving and prolific, meaning they can have children, for I shall outnumber the people by you. Meaning through his ummah, the Prophet ﷺ wished to have the greatest ummah in number. And so he wanted us to have children, and this has been the way of Anbiya in the past as well. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ إِذٍ. Do we have time? Inshallah, I'll read the English just for the sake of time, and mention in the book the story of Maryam when she secluded herself from her people to a place towards the east. Then she used a barrier to hide herself from them. Then we sent to her our spirit, meaning Jibreel alayhi salam, and then he took before her the form of a perfect human being. She said, I seek refuge from the All-Merciful against you if you are God-fearing. He said, I am but a message bearer of your Lord, sent to give you a boy purified. She said, how shall I have a boy while no human has ever touched me, nor have I ever been unchaste? Jibreel alayhi salam took the form of a man in front of her so she wouldn't become scared, because the form of an angel will be something that she would not be able to tolerate. And as I mentioned before, that this is a world of both zahiri and ghaibi, means the fact remains that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound by any of that. These are there basically asbab, the means are there basically by his design, is his sunnah to do it that way. But if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, he can do anything without the use of any means at all. He can create a child with two parents, as he normally does. Or he can create a child with one parent, as he did in the case of Isa and Hawa alayhim salam. Or he can create a man without any parents, as he did in the case of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. And these are miracles. The latter two situations are miracles of Allah. They're basically a break in the norm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does to show his qudra and his favor upon a prophet, for example. Inshallah, I don't think we'll get to that, but let me mention two ayat in the Quran along these lines. First, the ayah that we're looking at, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said in the last ayah, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ قَالَ رَبُّكِ هُوَ عَلَيَّ هَيِّنٌ. When Maryam alayhi salam said that how will I have a child when no human has touched me, meaning she didn't get married and nor have been unchaste, meaning I would never commit zina. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the ayah after that, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ قَالَ رَبُّكِ هُوَ عَلَيَّ هَيِّنٌ, that in this way it's going to happen. That even though you haven't done either of these two things, كَذَلِكَ, Allah can take care of that. That your Rabb, this is easy for him to do. In another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions similar in the same story in Ali Imran, قَالَتْ رَبِّي أَنَّ يَكُونُ لِي وَلَدْ وَلَمْ يَمْسَسْنِي بَشَرٌ. Maryam alayhi salam, she said, my Lord, how can I have a child when no man has touched me? قَالَ كَذَلِكَ اللَّهُ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angel said, كَذَلِكَ, in this way it'll just happen, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates what he wants. In a similar way, speaking about Zakaria alayhi salam, he said, when the angel came and informed him of having a child, he said, قَالَ رَبِّي أَنَّ يَكُونُ لِي غُلَامٌ وَقَدْ بَلَغَنِيَ الْكِبْرُ وَامْرَأَتِي آقِرٌ. That my Lord, how will I have a boy when I have reached old age and my wife is barren? The angel replied to him as well, قَالَ كَذَلِكَ اللَّهُ يَفْعَلُ مَا يَشَاءُ. He said, كَذَلِكَ, in the same way, in this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it happen. Allah does whatever he wants. This is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't need any means. He doesn't need anything. And so for us as believers, we have this direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should use it. That we should have the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take the means because we're commanded to. But know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need any of that either to make things happen for us. So the lesson here is that in these ayat is a complete refutation against those people that claim divinity for Isa alayhi salam because of his being born without a father. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pointed out that he doesn't need this. كَذَلِكَ, he can do it without it. He's done it before and he can do it here again. Not to mention that there have been other people throughout history, including the Buddha, for example, that have been thought to be born without a father through immaculate conception. So for a Muslim, though, this is not surprising that Isa alayhi salam had this happen to him. It's not illogical, and nor does it conclude divinity, because Allah is capable of all of it. This is also a refutation against those people who would say that Adam alayhi salam had parents, or is a product of evolution. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is clearly showing his capability that he can create without any precedent. So why would you tie the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply because it's the scientific paradigm of your time? Paradigms in science come and go. That they've always done that. They will continue to do that. But the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is eternal. It has never changed, nor can it change, nor will it change. And so we as believers, we take the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over all of that. There's more to say on this topic, but inshallah, I think I've said enough here. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to learn the lessons that are mentioned here. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connect us with Rabbul Alameen and have full yaqeen in our deen and in our iman. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خير السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله صلوا في بيوتكم صلوا في بيوتكم